Hi, and welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining. Good morning to our friends here in North America. Good evening to others across the globe. And hello to everyone that will be watching this on demand later. We are so excited to have you join us for our self-checkout webinar today, all from the perspective of your actual shoppers. So without further ado, a quick introductions. My name is Maria Babiskina. I'm the Global Head of Marketing here at TruRating, and I will be your facilitator today and also get us kicked off with a little intro, but super excited to introduce to you our speaker, Gareth Johns, Chief Data Officer here at TruRating. Gareth, why don't you share with us a little bit about your background, and then we'll dive right in.
Yep. Hi, everyone. I'm Gareth Johns. My role at TruRating, I guess, as the Chief Data Officer, is to work with all our retailers, understanding the questions that we can ask of their consumers, and then from that, with the insight, how they can better serve those consumers. And in terms of experience, it's getting much closer to 30 years than 20 years these days in terms of working with customer data across grocery, retail, fashion, apparel, discount retail, mainly in North America and Europe.
Wonderful. Thanks, Gareth. Could not think of a better candidate to cover us off on this topic today. So today we will talk you all through the role that self-checkout plays in customer experience. We'll share feedback from thousands of shoppers on the real reason behind why they choose self-checkout. And we'll talk through how necessary or unnecessary it is to give people a checkout choice. And then we'll wrap all of that up with the impact that self-checkout plays on staff availability and leave you with some amazing key takeaways and a Q&A session at the end. So if you have questions as we go along, feel free to type them into the chat box, and we will send everybody an on-demand version of this recording, as well as a full report in just a couple of weeks as a huge thank you for joining us today. So just really quick, I know there are a ton of data sources out there, some with conflicting information. So before we dive into what the data is actually telling us, I think it's really important just to share how the insights that you're going to be hearing about today were gathered. So at TruRating, we ran a 4-week global study across thousands of retail stores within various verticals just last month. And the reason we're able to share that data back with you so quickly is because of the sheer amount of responses that we were able to get in such a short time frame. And we do this by partnering with some amazing retailers, like Gareth mentioned, to ask their customers a single question on the pin pad as part of the checkout process. Now, that question is integrated into the payment experience, and with that, we're able to link the customer's response to over 50 unique data points. And I think from my perspective, that's where the real magic happens, because we can actually begin understanding how that rating and how that customer sentiment is directly impacting things like basket size, repeat visits, conversion rates, the things we all really care about. So this study in particular accounted for less than 1% of all of the questions that we asked across all of our retailers. But because we averaged 80% response rates, that's what got us to the amazing 40,000 shopper opinions that we're going to uncover for you today. So diving right in. While originally, a grocery innovation, we all know self-checkout stations are now in stores of all sizes, all verticals. These machines are just so much a part of the modern day retail experience that, less and less people are actually beginning to challenge the thinking behind them. In fact, the global market for SEO is projected to grow to about $12 billion just over the next few years. And obviously, we know for retailers that comes with a cost-saving incentive. Labor is one of the most expensive retail costs. And in times of inflation, increased costs, a growth in online shopping, self-checkout really provides an immediate solution for cost cutting. There was actually a study done by the Bureau of Labor of Statistics, which said that the number of cashiers employed is expected to drop by an additional 10% over the next decade, and that's at least in part due to self-checkout. So if we look at all of that from a customer's perspective, self-checkout obviously provides a faster and more convenient experience. Many of us enjoy that sense of speed and convenience that comes with the SEO option, but we all know that by no means is it a perfect solution yet. So there was actually another study done which showed that in a survey of about 1,000 consumers, 67% had experienced what they called a failure in the self-checkout lane. So we really wanted to get under the hood of all this and really understand from a consumer's point of view, what is actually going through their minds. So we were trying to decide if it made sense to do a study on this already pretty well-known topic. And I wanted to share a little story. I came across this article and it was about a mega retail brand who we all know and love. I won't say names, but they had just over 2,000 global stores, net worth of over $50 billion. And this merchant was actually covered in the press over a 7-second TikTok video that simply showed one customer checking out with just a couple items in a self-checkout lane. And this guy was mildly frustrated that he had to do it himself, but there was nothing really alarming in the video that from my marketing hat point of view would have made this go viral. But nevertheless, it had 1 million views, it had tons of comments, it made its way to national press. So I'm sitting here and I'm scratching my head, really trying to decipher, why this was even considered news in the first place. And at this point, I think I'd forgotten that I was doing research for work and I'm just down the TikTok rabbit hole. So I went back to the original post and I'm scrolling and reading and reading and scrolling. And I'm going through all of these comments that these shoppers had left on this TikTok video. So I'm in the comment section and like just about any post, I saw very polarizing viewpoints. People were either jumping on this, anti-self-checkout bandwagon, extremely passionate about this topic, saying things like, I feel like I should get paid for being my own cashier, to people on the complete opposite end of this, the defenders, if you will, saying things like, I'd rather do it this way. It's efficient. You had an option. Why are you complaining about it? So after being sucked into the comment section for far too long, I really began to kind of, think to myself, these comments are loud. You would think that they speak volumes, but they really don't tell us much at all. And it's because it's feedback coming from two very opposing, very passionate groups. And there really isn't a ton of data out there on how all those consumers that fall somewhere in the middle actually feel. So Gareth, why don't you help us peel back this onion and walk us through the gray area of what today's majority shoppers really think about SEO?
Yeah, great. Thanks for that, Maria. So I'll start with some of the questions that I think we ask outside of this study, and it's a question that every single retailer that we work with wants to understand. And that is, how easy as a consumer was it to check out today? And every retailer in the world, whatever type of retailer they are, whatever type of checkout experience they offer, they ask that question. And we see that over 96% of customers say that it was easy to check out. So at first glance, you'd say, well, that's great. Everybody's happy. However, when you start to split that down, not just by the type of retailer, but also the type of checkout experience, we start to see some real differences. And one of the first points I think I want to make is that it's not been as simple as just splitting this into, a manned checkout and a self-checkout. The definition of self-checkout has really evolved over the last couple of years. And we're seeing the emergence of what other retailers are calling an assisted checkout. So, at first I thought, oh, that's just a different word for the same thing. But actually, as you dig more into it, what we mean by self-checkout can really vary. It can go from something that's pretty close to a manned checkout of old, where really the only difference is the associate and the customer are on the same side of the desk, but the associate's doing all the work. And that can go all the way through to, I guess, the worst case world that we've probably all experienced. You're kind of that lonely person under a red flashing light where you're on the shame of the fact that for the third time, there's an undetected item in the bagging area. So self-checkout has really become this kind of very big experience with very different things going on. But in the broadest sense, scores are slightly below what you'd expect in a kind of traditional manned checkout experience. On the best of the assisted checkout, there's really not a difference. And then for the most kind of self-checkout experiences, we've seen that it's as much as 1 in 5 customers that say it wasn't easy to check out today. What was also interesting was how that percentage changes as the number of items in the basket grows. So, maybe at first that's not very surprising. The more items you buy, the more opportunity there is for something to go wrong, and the more work it is for you as a consumer, and kind of the harder it becomes, to balance everything in the bagging area. What was surprising to me, at least, was that for one of our convenience retailers, that tipping point where the percentage really started to drop from the 82% down to more like the 50% was when the size of the basket grew beyond 3 items. So that's not a great deal, of items in the self-checkout journey before customers are starting to have problems. And as a retailer, I think, retailers have to understand, what is the self-checkout experience that we want to be viable? It's got to at least be viable for the number of items that we see in our current baskets, and probably for the number of items that we aspire for our customers to put into their baskets. So given that, at the moment consumers can feel that self-checkout can be more difficult, it's more work, there's more risk. One of the other things that we asked was, well, what method of checkout do you prefer? So at this point, you'd expect that with the number of issues that customers would talk more to the preference of I prefer a manned checkout, but actually what we saw was a really big range between different retailers. For some of our retailers that were in the world of apparel, only 25% of customers say they preferred self-checkout. And what was really surprising is in the world of convenience, where kind of the performance, I guess the experience has been at its worst, that could grow to as much as 70%. So why is it then that, for customers that have got these issues and are having issues, why is it that self-checkout is still an experience? And that led us on to the next question in the study, which was, what is it that consumers value when it comes to self-checkout? And here, there were 3 questions that we looked at, well, 3 responses, I guess, that we looked at. And broadly speaking, we looked at, do you prefer self-checkout because of the impact it has on your wait time? So kind of speed of getting through checkout. Is it one that's more around control? So control over the pace at which you check out, the control of being able to pack your own goods at your own speed? Or was it one, I guess, more about transparency, the ability to keep track of the costs as you go through and the items, to make sure that the discounts that you thought you were going to get have been applied properly? And of the customers that responded to this question, 2/3 of them said that wait time, a less wait time or a smaller queue time was the most important reason for choosing self-checkout. The other 1/3 of customers were pretty evenly split between the other 2, which is, kind of controlling the pace of checkout and being able to keep track of prices. So this perception of wait time as the main importance or the main benefit of self-checkout is interesting, because what we also uncovered is when we look at the correlation of responses to multiple questions that are going on in the same store at the same time, we see a very high correlation with one of the other questions that we asked, which was really around perceptions of wait time. So yeah, if we can go to the next slide. What this point showed is that as perceptions of wait time grow, and people think they're taking more time, actually their perceptions of ease of checkout on the checkout lane, the self-checkout lane, decreases. And what that leads us is to consumers view the self-checkout journey as starting the minute they join, or the second they join that queue or that line. It's not about solely when they tap the screen and they start, I guess, what we would traditionally have thought of as the self-checkout journey. It starts the minute you join the line at the other end. And so if you spend a whole bunch of time focused on, as a retailer, the technology to make that self-checkout experience more and more intuitive, that's great, but that can get lost if the self-checkouts aren't all open and there's a massive line to even get to that point. So it's really important to focus as much as possible on making sure that you've got enough self-checkout lines for the busyness of that store, and that you've got as many on as you need to keep that wait time down. Otherwise, anything that you're doing on the self-checkout screens to make that more intuitive kind of gets lost because of that. So then one of the, I guess the other things that we talked about was, if we've got this point of consumers, we know what consumers like best about self-checkout, but one of the other questions we asked was, so why did customers choose self-checkout today? And 60% of customers said that they chose self-checkout because it was their preference, which is great, but that kind of leaves this other 40% who said actually they choose self-checkout today because they didn't feel they'd been given a choice. They didn't realize there was another choice. And I think this idea of a lack of choice, or maybe more accurately, a removal of choice, is a really interesting side effect of what we were talking about a bit earlier, of the blurring of the lines between a manned and a self-checkout journey. So if you think more about grocery and maybe general retail up until recently, it was pretty clear as a consumer. If I go to one of the lanes from lanes 1 to 10, I'm in a manned lane. I know what my role is and I know what my job is, right? It's my job to put the items on the till belt. It's the cashier's job to make sure everything scans. And it's my job probably to pack everything at the other end, and my job to pay. We've now entered this world where everything's a bit more flexible, a bit more fluid. When I go to a lane now, an assisted checkout lane, I'm not sure what the experience is I'm going to get. And it's not my choice anymore what experience I get. It's become a choice which is more the choice of the store manager, depending on how many members of staff they put on to assist checkout, or it's the choice of that store associate, depending on how helpful or unhelpful they choose to be. And that concept of choice has been removed. And 40% of customers that we asked are saying, I didn't feel that I had a choice other than to come to self-checkout. And I think that's a really big shift. And it's one that, for all the retailers that we've spoken to about self-checkout over the last sort of 6 months, it's not one that's really being acknowledged. We hear a lot of talk about hybrid models. We hear a lot of talk about flexibility, about how great assisted checkout is. But what we don't seem to be acknowledging is that this blurring of the lines is really removing a clear choice for consumers. That choice to go to a manned checkout or to go to a self-checkout and to know what experience I'm going to get has kind of gone. And I'm in a world where I'm at the mercy of that store and how well they choose to make use of the flexible technology in place. So that's the self-checkout. So just sort of going, I guess, beyond just the specific polling questions that we asked. We ask a lot of other questions in our retailers about other points of their experience, about how effective the staff are and how effective the store is. And while we talked a bit ago about the benefits that consumers see from self-checkout, what we wanted to really understand is, are there other benefits out there that maybe they don't associate specifically with the fact that they chose self-checkout, but it's benefits that retailers can give because of the fact that they're freeing up their staff from having to be, sort of tied to the till, and they can redeploy those staff throughout the store. And so we ask other questions around staff availability throughout the store, the cleanliness of the store, how well the shelves are stocked, those sort of benefits of the wider shopping experience that you would hope could be improved if you're freeing up staff from the checkout till. And what was interesting for one of our retailers that has moved from a world of effectively 100% manned terminals to a world of much more assisted checkout, was seeing how that has changed throughout that time. And we saw definite evidence that actually they were able to offer a better overall shopping experience. But what was interesting was it wasn't throughout the whole of the year. So it was very much, this one retailer, and it was very much for a one period of time, which was kind of over the holiday period. For the rest of the year, there's really no wider benefits that consumers are experiencing with the move to self-checkout. It still feels very much like it's a benefit that the retailer is gaining rather than a benefit maybe that the consumer is gaining. So I guess that's the sort of one of the benefits that maybe isn't being completely realized. I think there's another potential pitfall out there that we've seen that definitely is starting to happen. And that is one of this idea of acknowledging customers as they walk into store. And one of the questions that we ask quite often of our consumers is, were they greeted when they walked into store today? And the reason for that is because we know that power of the greeting. If you greet customers as they walk into the store, they're more likely to ask for help later on if they can't find something. They're more likely to put extra items in their basket. If you greet them warmly and welcome them, they're more likely to kind of be in a happy state and to buy more things. One of our retailers has even tracked it down to the fact that it reduces shrinkage, that fact of acknowledging a member of staff as a member of staff acknowledging the customer as they walk into the store. However, with a move to self-checkout, I think it removes sometimes that idea of interacting with customers. You know, as a member of staff, you can think, well, you know, this is now not only just a self-checkout, this is a pure self-serve experience now, and I don't need to acknowledge customers anymore. And for one of our retailers, we've actually seen that with the advent of more and more self-checkout, the percentage of customers that are being greeted in store is dropping, and it's getting down to sort of a 50-50 case as to whether or not you're actually even going to be acknowledged on that customer journey. And that's effectively giving up revenue, because it's reducing basket size and reducing the opportunity to engage with customers and to help them out. So I think, you know, as we move to self-checkout, that's going to be a really important point. So yeah, so I guess kind of in terms of our key takeaways, I think the most important one is this idea of speed. That's the benefit that consumers see from self-checkout, the ability to reduce the wait time and to get through that experience as quickly as possible. But in that, you have to realize that their concept of self-checkout starts the minute they join the end of that line. It's not at the point that they get to the device. And then I think this idea of tipping point is also quite interesting. Knowing the tipping point at which a self-checkout experience is no longer something that customers want is important, and that tipping point needs to be at least beyond where the upper range of most of your consumers are going to be. And then we also talked about this idea of choice. I think giving consumers the choice of how they check out is quite important still. If we're going to move away from that, I think we need to acknowledge it, and we need to realize that consumers need to be taken through that journey. And if we are going to give them a clear choice, then I think it needs to be made clear. And oftentimes that's not really happening. And then I guess the final point I'd leave with is that, you know, that checkout experience is in fact the final touch point that consumers have with your brand. However good or bad the experience has been in store up until that point, that is the lasting impression that consumers are going to have as they walk out the door. So getting that experience right is really important. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Gareth. Tons of data jam-packed into that short 20-minute session. So we do want to open it up for questions. We have received a couple. So Gareth, how do you see the concept of self-checkout evolving with the increased use of mobile apps and mobile checkout?
So yeah, I think mobile checkouts are really interesting potential way of going. We work with a lot of our retailers with the idea of the importance of mobile apps, or the potential benefits of using your mobile more when you're in the store for other reasons, either findability of products or giving out discounts or making recommendations or retail media or whatever it might be. But I don't think, at the moment at least, there's a massive uptake in the need to use a mobile device while in store, specifically as you walk around the store. I think that if mobile checkout can become seen as a real benefit to consumer, if it can really tackle this speed of throughput, this wait time issue, then I think it might be something that consumers start to take up more readily. And I think that's the tipping point, that once you've got them on that, then there are all sorts of other benefits that you can give to a consumer that on their own wouldn't have been enough to get them to make use of that app. So yeah, I think it will change, but it has to be started from what is the benefit to consumers, isn't it? Is it going to help them, rather than here's a way that we can effectively get rid of the real estate at the front of the store and get more people doing the job that they expect of us. I think the other thing about mobile apps is that, unlike the assisted checkout and the blurring of the lines, it's pretty clear that if you're going to use a mobile app to go through and kind of scan your own items as you and manage your own payment, you kind of know what you're in for with the minute you open that app. So I think to that point about choice, it is another method of payment, and it's a pretty clear one what your role is if you take on that.
Great, thank you. And just another general question here. Could you expand a little more on the point about removal of choice?
Yeah, so I think from my point of view, what we're seeing is that prior to this point, and it's probably still very true in grocery retail at least, you know what you're letting yourself in for when you choose the method of kind of checkout. But yeah, when you get to an assisted checkout, I think that becomes much less likely. You don't really know what you're letting yourself in for, and it can change even within your transaction. So, we've seen some of the retailers that we work with have got these new kind of hybrid screens that can be flipped either way, and they can flip halfway through a transaction. So what you might start off as a self-checkout might become a more manned checkout. What starts as a manned checkout can end as a self-checkout. The kind of clear differentiation is sort of being lost in all this. But yeah, to my point is that's great, but it's not the consumer that's really ever making the choice of which way it's going. It's the retailer that's making that choice, or the store associate that's making that choice. And I guess while in principle I can say, no, let me do this myself, or please come over and help me. I don't know. As a 40-something Englishman, you're not gonna do that. You're just gonna let them do something and kind of stand there and get on with it. And I think most consumers are probably in that sort of state of they're not going to force it one way or the other. So I think if at all possible, at least having one till one way and making it clear to consumers that there is still a very traditional manned checkout is still a good way to go. But I think in a way that the train sort of left the station, and we're going to a more hybrid and assisted world. But we just have to acknowledge that isn't straightforward for consumers, and they're going to have to kind of get to this point of understanding what's going on, and the fact that this choice is kind of being lost.
Thanks, Gareth. And then we have a few more questions from the audience, as well as our audience on LinkedIn. So I guess to that point, just to bring it even further, what about checkout free stores in general, in terms of, just how that will impact the customer experience and anything that people should be mindful of as kind of like the next gen version of this?
Yeah, I mean, I guess checkout free is almost getting to the most efficient method of mobile checkout that you can get to, where you're not only, kind of getting through and getting out without having to do anything. You're not even having to kind of scan maybe as you go, and everything's being done kind of by what you pick up and where it goes. So I think it comes back to what are the benefits that consumers want to see. I think that definitely hits on the wait time point. Other than the fact of like you've got to check in and kind of get into the store sometimes, but that idea to get through with little to no wait time, if checkout free enables that, then that's great. Whether it enables that point about control and knowing how much I'm spending and knowing whether I get the discount at the point and that everything's being done properly, I think consumers might take a bit of time to get there. But from what we've seen at the moment, I guess we would have to ask the question, what do you like most about checkout free experiences? But if it follows the same sort of logic, then I think it definitely hits on the wait time point. So that would be good.
Great, thank you. And are you aware of any seasonality or just any seasons in general that make self-checkout more or less desirable from what we've seen in our data just over the course of the year?
Well, I think the point about in stores where self-checkout had been put in place and the wider benefits that gave to the store, those benefits were seasonal. They hit on the point where consumers were likely to be in during the holiday period leading kind of Black Friday up to Christmas. That was when the store was able to deliver a better overall experience because of the fact that they'd moved to this kind of self-checkout world. So I don't think as much seasonal. What we have looked at is does it have a better impact on ease of checkout throughout the week? So do you see during the really busy periods, actually in stores that have more self-checkout, they have better throughput, they get better overall scores? In stores that don't have that, does that really start to hit at the weekends or in the busy periods where, you know, the queue times are and the wait times are longer as a result? We haven't seen anything that would suggest that, because I think most stores are kind of right-sized for what they're doing. So, you know, no, we haven't seen a big improvement really season to season, other than this one point about the wider benefits to the store in December.
Great, thank you. And just a couple more questions. So we called out the convenience sector as, 82% saying that they found it easy to check out, and, more so general retail at around 95%. Were there any specific verticals, sectors, or retailers that we worked with that you saw scored much higher than that 95%?
Yeah, but I mean, I guess you can't get much higher, but I think the best retailers that we saw were up at around 98%. And that's really the kind of manned checkout, fashion, apparel, retail, where the member of staff is helping you on the store floor and is taking you to the checkout and managing you through. That's probably the world where we've seen the easiest method of checkout. And then I said that, the 82% was more of a convenience retail as a whole when using self-checkout. When you get to bigger baskets in self-checkout, that can drop to kind of more like 50% in those cases, but there aren't as many of those types of customers and those types of shopping baskets. So it's a small percentage of the whole. But yeah, you can get a pretty big range.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Well, I know we are up on time. If for any reason we were not able to get to your question, or if you have any follow-up questions, go ahead and type them in the event chat or the Zoom chat now, and we will be sure to reach out to you separately after the webinar. For everyone else, the webinar will be recorded and sent out to everyone. For those that are joining us or joined us on LinkedIn Live, I know there was a little bit of a delay, so we'll make sure that you get the full recording in case for any reason you missed the first few minutes of our session today. And then last but not least, as a thank you to everybody that joined us, we are going to send a full report and market research study on the state of self-checkout, which will dive a little deeper into all of these points that Gareth presented today. So feel free to share with your teams, check it out, and then also reach out to us should you have any questions, comments, or would like to bounce some ideas off of Gareth and dive a little bit more into the research. We're more than happy to chat with you. So thank you again for joining as part of our True Rating webinar series. Please follow us on LinkedIn, because there will be many, many more to come. And we are so grateful. Again, just a huge thank you to our retailers, partners, industry friends, and charity partners, as well as our team for being a huge part of this. So thank you all, and have an absolutely wonderful day and amazing weekend.